All right, so we have got our lesson on our 10th day lesson here, our 9th PowerPoint. We're gonna be looking at the exercise health benefits today. And so a lot about like why exercise is so darn good for us, how to prescribe exercise considerations and sort of where those come from. And we'll talk a little bit about like, the best ways to make sure you're working out hard enough. Because that's a big part of making sure that you get the benefits of exercise. So we're going to be able to talk a little bit about some of the diseases and disabilities that result from physical inactivity, the role that exercise plays in us generating, very positive health benefits, what constitutes a sedentary lifestyle. So when we say sedentary, what I mean, by that. And we'll talk a little bit about this idea that exercise is medicine. We get to put that in quotes. But it actually is a program. And it's very funny, but like, it's not a NASM program. Oh, Chris, you got a new photo. I was like, who's on my Zoom call?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, so we are going to be looking at this program called Exercise is Medicine, or EIM. And it's funny because it's actually a program that ACSM, the American Council of Sports Medicine, I think, which is NASM's biggest competitor, by the way. Like whenever I tell people, like when people are asking what certification to get, I always tell them, obviously go with NASM. But if they don't want to, and they want to go with something else, ACSM is right underneath them, and they're constantly like vying back and forth for control of the fitness industry. I feel like, although NASM's marketing team is much better. But ACSM actually worked with the U.S. like health department to develop this exercise as medicine program. And it's the idea of like, well, what are the standards, they really analyze and spend a lot of time looking at different meta studies and analyses and, doing things and determining what's the bare minimum for someone to get like physically active. What's the, what amount of exercise will actually really have positive benefits and keep people from dealing with some of these diseases. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, which is going to be kind of fun. We'll talk about the association between like regular exercise and life expectancy. Like I said, yes, I think I said this yesterday in one of the classes. We know that grip strength is sort of tied to long life, and I think that statistic is sort of misunderstood. Like a lot of people might then go, oh, and then they go buy a hand gripper. They don't ever exercise. They just sit on the couch and do the hand gripper. And it's like, well, now I got great grip strength, and it's like that's not necessarily going to directly translate to long life. We do know, we see that, but like probably the reason we see that is because like when you have a strong grip, you have a strong everything else, and that meant that you led a lifestyle that helped you develop, be a physically active person. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we will get into, how to basically get started in physical activity, and then we will describe our FIT principles again, the frequency, the intensity, the time, type, and the enjoyment. And then the very end, I should have warned you guys, today is a math day. So I am no math teacher, but we are going to talk about how to implement the Karvanen formula, the Karvanen method, which is sort of the gold standard for prescribing what intensity of exercise someone should do. So we will sort of break that down today. So, good Lord, is there another page? Oh, and then the benefits of being muscular as well. Oh my God, that is 7 pages of learning objectives. That whoever wrote this PowerPoint, they really went overboard. We'll talk about resistance training, and then we'll talk about like how to avoid sedentary disease. We already said that, arthritis, asthma, COPD, stuff like that. So let's start off with sort of the most common sort of disorder in the US, which is going to be obesity, right? So when we look at like statistics, and this is something we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this mod in particular, right? you know, we live in an increasingly sedentary world, right? Now, I'm not going to consider doing laundry exercise necessarily, because it's not really like physical, you know, it's not exercise, but I would argue that it is a little bit of physical activity back in the day compared to how it is now. You know, you think about like how we used to have to do laundry, you know, you'd scrub it on a washing board, you know, you'd soak it and like hang it up to dry, and then later you'd go out and get it, you know. I was watching, did anybody go see the new version of West Side Story? You know, it's New York City and all the clotheslines are hanging between the buildings, and they, you know, pull the clothes out there and they wash it in the sink, and you know, back in the day. And it's like, that was a very physically active time. And so we're looking at like why obesity is rising, and it's like, why is obesity rising? I've got this watch that tells me what my heart rate is. Our technology is amazing. We got treadmills, we got machines, we got all this really cool stuff. And it's like, along with that, we also have a washing machine that we can just kind of toss our stuff in, hit a button, and walk away. We got a dishwasher that we can throw our dishes into. We can just kind of walk away. You know, we are living in a technologically advanced world that has unfortunately had some side effects of like making us more physically inactive. We've got more jobs that are sedentary. You know, rather than going to work in a factory or something, you know, a lot of times it's you know, working on a computer doing Zoom calls. You know, it's a very different thing. And so we're seeing like less physically active stuff, and so people are having a harder time balancing out their energy needs, you know, because at the same time, something that's kind of problematic, we also have a lot of high energy foods, meaning that we have a lot of high calorie foods, but not necessarily the most nutrient dense foods available to us. You know, like if you were a cave person, a McDonald's #2 or whatever, I don't know, with a burger and fries and a Coca-Cola is a fantastic meal. You know, like it's an excellent source of calories that is going to get you through, you know, for hunting purposes, and give you the energy necessary to like live the rest of your, like, our cave person brains are absolutely love the idea of high energy foods, right? So because there's so many calories in like a McDonald's cheeseburger and a McDonald's thing of fries, it's great. It's a great source of energy, which is why our brain goes, yeah, oh my God, so much energy. Give me more of that. But the problem is, it's not just about energy production when it comes to using food, right? This is what we're going to talk more about on Tuesday as we start to transition into our nutrition class. It's not just about the calories, it's about the nutrients, right? We know that B vitamins, for instance, act as enzymes to help us with the Krebs cycle. So that's why they say B vitamins give you energy. They don't actually have any energy of their own, but they do give you a little bit of extra energy thanks to, you know, being very good at unlocking the energy from glucose and stuff, and fat, by the way, like glucose and fat. It's really good for B vitamins. What's up, Simon? Good to see you.
How's it going? Good morning.
Good morning. And then we've got, you know, we've got, those are your B vitamins. We got vitamins A, D, E, and K, as well as vitamin C that we haven't talked about yet. They all have various effects, you know, like vitamin K can help you with blood clotting. Vitamin D helps you synthesize cholesterol and you know, absorb calcium into your bones. You know, and then we got all of our, speaking of calcium, we got all of our minerals, right? Iron for our blood and magnesium for our parts of our immune system and inflammatory responses, you know, so much. And then we look at like the special fatty acids that aren't necessarily part of like, you know, what we consider, it's like a, you know, when we talk about fats, oftentimes we're just talking about like good fats versus bad fats. The reason they're good fats because they have these special fatty acids in them that your body can't make. Those are your omega-3s and omega-6s, right? So you need to make sure that those are in your diet. Whereas a McDonald's hamburger is going to be mostly just saturated fat, maybe a little trans fat in there, and that's real bad for us. So this is where I kind of had, I was just being very overly pedantic with someone one time, and they were like, oh, McDonald's is so bad for you. And I was like, well, technically, McDonald's isn't necessarily bad for us as much as it is exceedingly not good for us. And what I mean is like it's a nutritionally bankrupt food. Doesn't necessarily always have to be high in sugar. Like the healthiest items on McDonald's menu might not actually have a lot of saturated fat. They might not necessarily have a lot of sugar in them. Those are the two things that often cause us the most harm actively. But it is a source of calories without being a source of nutrients, which means that like it's not necessarily bad for us directly, like it's not attacking us, but it definitely is not helping us out. And then it fills up our the number of like calories. It fills up the amount of like space to eat per day. This is one of the reasons why like super ultra low calorie diets. One of the things we're going to talk about like why that is not safe. Think about like being on like a 1200 calorie diet. Okay. Very common. You hear people get on 1200 calorie diets all the time. They are marketed in magazines and all kinds of stuff. I've never in my career taken a client to 1200 calories. But like, cause it's a dangerously low, cause here's the real thing, right? Let's say you have an iron willpower. One of the biggest problems with 1200 calories, you're just going to fall off the wagon. But let's say you don't. Let's say you're not going to fall off the wagon. You have just the most willpower of any human being on the planet, and you decide to go to work, and it's so and so's birthday, and they've got like a tray of cupcakes, and you're like, oh, all right, I'll have a cupcake, and you look and see it's like, all right, it was 250 calories. So I got to cut 250 calories out of the rest of my day because I have an iron willpower and I'm going to stick to 1200 calories. So you don't fall off the wagon in your diet. You still eat the right number of calories, the right number, quote. But like now, 250 divided by 1200, that was 21%, 20.8%. It's 21% of the chances you've got to get vitamin C into your diet today. 21% of the chances that you've got to ensure that you're getting enough fatty acids. 21% of the chances that you've got to make sure you're getting enough fiber. You didn't get any of those things from that cupcake, So that's what I think of when I think of McDonald's. I think that it is a nutritionally bankrupt food. So we've got all this nutritionally bankrupt food. We've got all this amazing technology that makes our lives easier while making our lives harder. And so our ability to balance out our energy out versus our energy in is shifting. And we're starting to get to a place where there's more energy in than there is energy going out. And rather than being in balance, which is what we want to maintain our body weight, we're shifting here, which is causing us to gain a lot of weight. And so being overweight, being obese, definitely one of the most common problems in the US or in the Western world is what we say. Now, when I say overweight, when I say obese, there is a medical definition for this. However, I do want you guys to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, no pun intended, but you want to take this with a grain of salt because we are going to be using the BMI scale to determine obesity, to sort of categorize it. And the BMI scale, the body mass index, is a formula that I do need all of you guys to know. I want you to get it memorized. Not that you're ever going to have to do math on your actual NASM test, but you do need to be able to pick this formula out of a lineup. They'll be like, which of the following is the formula for the BMI, for calculating BMI, right? And you'll get 4 options. You need to be able to spot the formula. So what the formula is, it looks like this. There's a couple of ways you can kind of lay it out. It is your weight in kilograms, right? Divided by your height. Actually, you know what? Your height in meters squared. Okay. So when I say meters squared, this is what I mean, right? So we're dividing these right here, and we're taking our meter squared, smaller, put it over there. We're dividing our height by our meter squared, right? That is going to be your BMI formula. So that's gonna I guess put it here, equals body mass index, or BMI. So that's how we write out this formula, right? It's this divided by this equals this. And it gives us a really very easy to analyze number. And that's why this was created. Now, notice how I did not give you any other statistics about this person that we are maybe measuring here, right? I can tell you one other thing about them. All I told you was what their weight is, and I told you what their height is. That's it. There are a lot of factors that go into the health of a human being beyond height and weight. So I do not think this is the greatest scale in the world for measuring health, but I do think that it's a very fast way to do some very simple math to figure out where to put maybe a large group of people, you know, in a category, right? And that's why it was created. And by the way, the BMI is from like, I think it's like the 17th century. So long ago, 1830s, you know, a long time ago, you know. And the idea was that like they just wanted to look at large populations very, very quickly. So overweight is going to be defined as having more body fat than is considered optimally healthy. And we usually consider someone to be overweight if their BMI is anywhere from 25 to 29.9. So go to a BMI calculator here. We throw in, I am 6'1" and I weigh about 175 pounds. If we hit calculate, my BMI is going to be 23.1, which is getting pretty close to the end of the range, right? 24.9 is the lowest in the sort of healthy weight category, right? So, you know, that's towards the higher range there. But what happens if you have a lot of muscle mass? We know that muscle is way heavier than body fat is. Let's take a look at like how much did Arnold Schwarzenegger weigh when he won Mr. Universe, his whole thing, bodybuilding competition. So his contest weight, the weight where he was like, you know, winning a prize for being the most in shape person in the world. How tall is Arnold Schwarzenegger? He's 6'3", right? 6'2". So he's 6'2". He weighed 235 pounds at the time he won the competition for Mr. Universe, right? So if we go back to my BMI calculator, we say 6'2", 235 pounds, and I hit calculate, his BMI was 30.2, which doesn't just make him overweight, right? Which would be 29.9. It puts him at being obese. So when he won the award for being the most in shape person in said universe, he would have been considered obese medically. So, and I'm not necessarily saying he's the most, you know, healthy person in the world, although I think he actually takes very good care of himself. Old school bodybuilders did. Actually, that's not true. Old school bodybuilders were exceptionally unhealthy. They would eat like 10 steaks a day. But the middle bodybuilders and a lot of bodybuilders of today are very healthy. You know, he definitely would have been, and he would have been considered very obese at, you know, when he was like before, during the off season, he was 260 pounds, you know. 6'2", 260, 33.4, you know. So those are sort of, so again, when I say obesity and I'm talking about BMI, take it with a grain of salt, because like if you have a lot of muscle mass, it's going to throw you into, you know, obesity categories and things like that. It is just your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. So we can take this formula and break it down a little bit to make it a little bit simpler. It's going to be your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters times your height in meters. So that's that's going to give you meters squared, right? So that's the other way we can kind of kind of lay this out, right? Is we can do that there, and then that will also give you BMI. So equals body. Now, there is a American formula to this. I don't need you to have this one memorized, but if anybody there at home is like, I'd like to do this manually for some reason rather than use a calculator. If you do want to do the sort of Americanized version of this, since we don't use kilograms and we don't use meters, you can use a very similar formula. It is going to be your height in inches. Your weight in pounds divided by your height in inches squared. That's the sort of, oh, and that's the American form, sort of. We gotta do it here in just a second. So it's all of that height in or weight in pounds divided by height in inches squared, right? But you actually have to do a little bit more here. You need to take the whole thing, and you need to multiply that entire thing by 703, and then that will equal body mass index. So that's how we calculate the BMI if you want to use the American version. So for instance, like I said, I'm 6'1", so that in inches would be 73 inches, right? So 73 times 73, so that's 5,329 inches squared. Like I said, I weigh 175 pounds. 175 divided by 5,329. We're going to get a real weird looking number here, 0.0328, right? And then you need to multiply the whole thing by 703. There's my BMI of 23, like we saw a second ago. So that's how we do the sort of American formula if you want to do it. Honestly, there's so many apps nowadays, guys. You don't need to know how to do that. But like I said, one thing I do need you guys to memorize, recognize this formula. It's in a lot of your homeworks. It's in a lot of NASM exams. I can almost guarantee it will be on your actual NASM test. So if you can recognize that formula, it's a free point, instantly just get it right, move on to the next question. So the other thing we need to know is we need to know the ranges of our categories. This is a little bit more difficult to memorize, but body mass index is going to be underweight is anything less than 18.5. That is also really dangerous. We consider anything below 18.5 to be what we call anorexia. It's an eating disorder, very, very dangerous. Normal weight, I hate that term, but normal weight is going to be 18.5 to 24.9. So that's where we want our clients to fall. Overweight is going to be 25 up to 29.9. And then obesity is anything greater than 30. There's also obesity class 2, which is 35, obesity class 3, which is 40. And that's where we really start to see a lot of extremely detrimental, very dangerous effects. So why is all this important? Well, statistically, we do know that individuals who fall into the obesity category are at increased risk of specific health diseases and specific health problems. So for instance, we know that diabetes is much more common. All of the people out there who have diabetes, there's probably plenty of them who fall into normal weight categories. But generally, the highest percentage of obesity, actually, I think I might Google that. What percentage of people with diabetes have a BMI above 30? So what I'm looking for, these are our general statistics. That's the prevalence of obesity. Aha. Oh, it's a whole NCBI article. Uh-oh. Give me the abstract. 64% it looks like of people greater than 18. So 64% of diabetics above the age of 18 are obese. So that's a pretty substantial amount, right? And that's just obese. That's above 30. The overweight category is just below that. So we know that there's a correlation here. Doesn't mean if you have a high BMI, you're definitely going to get diabetes. Do not take what I'm saying and interpret it that way. But the same thing that is true for diabetes is true for heart disease. It's true for stroke. It's true for cholesterol problems. One of the reasons we do look at BMI is because it's a very quick way for us to go, that person is at increased risk of X, Y, and Z. Okay. Doesn't mean you're going to get them. Just means you're putting more chips down on the roulette table. So there we go. Now, being overweight, like I said, what's the reason? How does it happen? Well, remember, physiologically, weight gain, and Alyssa, I know you were asking me about this at one point, whether it's muscle gain, fat gain, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's all about just energy balance. It literally comes down to calories. If your calories in are greater than your calories out, you're going to gain weight. If you worked out a lot, then chances are that weight you're going to gain is probably muscle. Other way around, not so much. You know?
So should there be like a point in time where I give my body like kind of a rest break as far as going to the gym, so that way I can kind of build like or create more body fat, so that way I'm not working out more than my intake?
No, you don't necessarily have to do that. No.
Okay.
If you want to take like planned breaks, if you want to take like a week off from intense training and do what's called a deload week, that can be very helpful if you hit like a really hard plateau. And that doesn't mean don't work out. It means go take a yoga class, go take a spin class, do something new, go for a hike, take it easy for a week, stay physically active, burn calories still. It's great. And then come back to it and go back to the weight training. You'll notice like, oh, your body's like, okay. And it has time to kind of de-stress and focus on adapting again. But no, you don't need to get to a place where it's like, it's important to gain body fat in order to gain muscle. You will often see a lot of bodybuilders will, a lot of times they'll call it bulking, and it's where they gain a lot of body fat as well as muscle. They are doing that because like they are trying to gain as much muscle as possible in the shortest amount of time. So if they gain a little bit of body fat that comes along with it, they're just not worried about it. It's like, I'm going to trim that off before the season's over anyways. Average people, we don't focus on that. We focus on sort of, we call it recomposition. Where it's like you may lose a little bit of body fat, you'll gain a little bit of muscle. Maybe while you're gaining a little bit of muscle, you might gain a little bit of, we're not like doing the extreme versions of this,
Got it. Thank you.
So the big reason, like energy in versus energy out, it's due to the increasingly sedentary lifestyle, thanks to the improvements in technology. We're just not burning as much energy throughout the day as we used to, and so it's screwing up our math. It's shifting the darn formula in a direction that we don't necessarily want it to go, and you look at kids and stuff, and I don't want to go all, when somebody said, I don't want to go all Andy Rooney on you guys, but like, we do have there's more video games, there's more phones and tablets and great television out there, thanks to streaming services and stuff. There's just a lot more. There's stuff out there nowadays that, yes, is going to sort of also keep us on the couch. And when we get those habits when we're young, those habits often carry into adulthood. So regular exercise and life expectancy. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's get out of these America and inactivity slides as fast as we can. So regular activity does have like a direct positive benefit on life expectancy. We see it in every statistical piece of, every number we run, everything we look at. We know that longevity is affected by our physical activity, our nutritional habits, and smoking. So if you have low physical activity, poor nutritional habits, and you are a smoker, that is going to put you at increased risk of specific diseases, right? So Some of those effects are going to be things like sarcopenia. So here's what kind of sucks about sarcopenia. This is particularly dangerous. You guys might remember yesterday, I said you can experience hypertrophy. Talked all about the various versions of hypertrophy, right? But you can also experience what's called hyperplasia. Hyperplasia doesn't necessarily happen directly as an effect of working out. It's more determined by like your genetics saying, oh, we need more muscle cells. So hyperplasia is your body making more muscle cells. Hypertrophy is making your current muscle cells bigger. That's what we usually do. Now, if you are physically inactive, you might think that you'll experience atrophy, and you'd be right. Atrophy is the opposite of hypertrophy. That is where your muscles shrink, but you still have, at least you still have the same number of muscle cells. But one of the biggest problems with inactivity is that you will sometimes also experience what is called sarcopenia, which is a decrease in the number of muscle cells. Way worse than atrophy. Atrophy sucks. It's bad, you know, but at least it's a cell that, you know, shrank and we can make it bigger again later. Sarcopenia, it disappears. So getting it back is very, very difficult because like your genetics kind of have to tell you, well, let's make some new muscle mass. This is another one of the reasons why anorexia is so dangerous. And it does have like long-term side effects on individuals because like they can experience sarcopenia. And so growing muscle mass back later on is exceptionally difficult because they have less fibers to work with and less fibers to make bigger. Not that it can't happen. I know a lot of people who have, a lot of like women in the bodybuilding industry actually, because disordered eating is so incredibly common. We'll talk about it in nutrition. It's incredibly common. More common than I think a lot of like men are aware of. You know, it has very long-term side effects. And a lot of women who are in the bodybuilding industry actually used to deal with disordered eating. And so it's a really great way to sort of, for people to sort of empower themselves and, you know, get up on stage. Sometimes people dig that stuff. You know, I know a lot of people who have done that, you know, I think it's great. There was like a article I read the other day that made me so angry. And it was about like some guy who just didn't look like a bodybuilder. He just wasn't, you know, he wasn't like super cut. And don't get me wrong, that's what the sport is. It's about getting the lowest body fat percentage possible, looking a specific way. But for me, I'm like, what I like about bodybuilding is like it helps people feel like really empowered, you know? And this guy was an obese person who lost a lot of weight. He had like a lot of like loose skin and stuff. And he was in like a bodybuilding competition, didn't look like any of the competitors. And like the internet being the internet and full of trash people, you know, like got on there and they were like ripping on this guy and saying he had no right to be there at this competition, which I was livid reading this freaking article. Because that's what the internet does to people. You know, like, but you know, like we do see that all the time. That's one of the reasons why, like, I've had a lot of students actually, they'll like start Sochi, they got 9 months, and then you know, at some point in their program, they're like, I'm going to do a competition, you know, and they do their one and, you know, get up on stage, feel really good about themselves, and they carry that into the rest of their lives and stuff. So that is also kind of related to the next thing we're going to talk about, which is an effect of physical inactivity, which is depression. You know, staying inside all day. This is like one of the things they've been talking about with COVID for the last 2 years. You know, they're like, please go outside and go for a walk. Everybody who's trapped at home right now. It's just not good. So I'm from Oregon. I'm from the Northwest. In the Northwest, and Arlene, I was just telling you this the other day. Like I think like 2 days ago, I brought this up. In the Northwest, we will often deal with this condition called SAD. It stands for Students Against It. What? So SAD, S-A-D-D, is seasonal. Oh, interesting. They're just going to call it seasonal affective disorder. And what it means is like when you live in a place like Oregon, which is cloudy 365 days a year, and wet and rainy and stuff, you don't really get to go outside because it's wet and rainy, or you will choose to stay inside, I should say. You don't get a lot of sunlight, and our brains kind of need sunlight. like we need it to sort of produce a lot of like happy hormones and stuff. So it can sometimes lead to depression. And so like what you'll do is you'll buy what is called a happy lamp. And a happy lamp is a lamp that has like UV on it, very similar to the light. And you'll just every morning kind of wake up, put your face in front of the happy lamp for about a minute or so. And then your brain goes, oh, sunlight. And then it makes happy hormones. And it can actually have very positive benefits on depression. And that's super common where I'm from. A lot of people buy those. I've never owned one personally, but I've been around them my whole life. So that's a big part of this. Like your body creates a lot of like stress hormones. Stress hormones often lead to depression. Coronary heart disease, that one is directly very easy to understand when being physically inactive. You know, we know that being physically inactive means that you don't have to produce any testosterone or even like you need to produce less estrogen. And, you know, you need to use way less of all of the cholesterol stuff that's in your body, but it's still coming into your diet. So what ends up happening is that cholesterol just kind of builds up in the walls of our cells and eventually starts blocking our blood flow, raising blood pressure, having very bad problems. That's where we get hypertension. And then it also, if that happens in the arteries that are supplying your heart with blood, well, then your heart isn't going to get enough oxygen, you can't function properly, and that's exceptionally dangerous. So definitely a big effect there. COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, definitely associated with like smoking, filling your lungs with materials that are blocking those tubes where oxygen needs to travel. Now the tubes don't have access to your bloodstream, therefore the oxygen can't get into your body. That's chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. Crap in your lungs, you know, real bad for us. Diabetes is another one. You know, there are two types of diabetes. I don't think we're talking about that today, are we? No, so there's two types of diabetes. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1, unfortunately, is just sort of an autoimmune disorder. That's where you kind of have a bum pancreas. Your pancreas is supposed to produce this hormone called insulin. Insulin is going to drive sugar out of your blood and put it into your glycogen stores, so we don't leave that sugar in there. If you have type 1 diabetes, your pancreas doesn't make enough insulin. But 95% of diabetes cases are type 2 diabetes, which is where your pancreas is functioning just fine. It's producing plenty of insulin. In fact, because of the high sugar in your diet, or because of the excessive abdominal obesity, oftentimes, your body is creating tons of insulin. And then it's kind of like caffeine. You know, I'm sure everybody in here knows the more coffee you drink, the more coffee you need, right? Like I remember when I started drinking coffee in college being like, this is amazing. And now it's like, I just need a cup to get through the day, you know. You get less sensitive to it, you know. The same thing is true of insulin. So your cells become less sensitive. And so your pancreas is producing plenty, but now the sugar's not getting pulled out of your blood. So it just stays in your blood, which doesn't sound that bad because we obviously need to have some sugar in our blood. That's why we have normal levels of blood sugar. But when you have excessive levels of sugar in your blood, it prevents things like oxygen and other materials from being able to move where they need to move. And that's obviously very bad. So those are the effects of inactivity. That's all the negative stuff, right? So let's flip the script here and talk about like becoming physically active. So somebody is maybe dealing with some of these conditions, maybe some of these comorbidities. So we call them like they're, you know, multiple diseases associated with one another. So they're dealing with all this, and now they want to get to a place where they're like, you know what, I'm going to make a change. It's January, you know, like New Year's resolution time. Like, let's go, let's do something new. And so a new client who's becoming physically active, right, might schedule like a medical evaluation to start. They go see their doctor. They learn about some of their baseline statistics. And it's like their doctor's like, all right, you're obese, your blood sugar levels are a little higher than we would like them. That means you got the borderline diabetes. Who the heck is this? Oh, it's the new guy. This guy is so motivated. We got a new student coming in February. I think everybody's gonna love him. He is highly motivated. They go see their doctor. Their doctor gives them a couple statistics, like these are the things we want to improve, right? So if they went to the doctor, great, right? And if they find that, let's say they couldn't get necessarily like a doctor's approval before they come to the gym, they come to the trainer, they're like, all right, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to get healthier, right? But they have some of these comorbidities. It's not the safest thing in the world for us to start just like be like, all right, well, I'm going to teach you what is called a burpee, right? And you teach them how to do burpees, right? Which is arguably, I don't know if everybody in here knows what a burpee. I'm sure you guys do, but burpees are freaking tough. This is like one of the hardest exercises out there, right? Because of the massive amounts of blood pressure changes. You're bringing your body horizontal or vertical, then you bring it horizontal. You bring it vertical, you go horizontal. Your blood's trying to keep up with you. A lot of people can feel very faint when they do a burpee. So it's like chest to the floor and jump up. Now, that's kind of variations, right? The actual burpee is just chest to the floor and back up. That one she did a push-up. That is actually a variation of the burpee. You can do both. I like the push-ups ones better, but push-up ones are a little bit less cardio, a little bit more chest strength. But I do like those. It's not very safe to take somebody who does, has some of these comorbidities, right? So if they can't get a medical evaluation, say they didn't get a doctor's permission, doesn't mean we can't necessarily work with that client. Just means that we need to start with very low intensity exercise, which is going to be safe. We might honestly just put them on a walking program, do a little bit of stretching before and after, and then eventually they can maybe take up jogging, and eventually they have time to make that freaking doctor's appointment, and then we can get into the strength training. So in the beginning, the Exercise is Medicine program is just trying to get people out of the house and walking. Walking is actually incredible for us guys. It really does have a lot of long-term, very, very, very positive health benefits. So here's how we prescribe a walking program. What we're going to consider when it comes down to any exercise prescription, and this would be true of a walking program. It would also be very true of like a strength training program, a running program, a spinning program, swimming, whatever. Biggest things we're going to consider are these main sort of three things here, right? Type, intensity, and duration. So type is going to be irrelevant when it comes to just getting somebody physically active. Honestly, I don't care what you do if you're just trying to get physically active. If I've got somebody who literally has just been sedentary and I just want them to start getting that energy balance a little bit more, neutral, or maybe even like, into a negative energy balance, I don't care what the exercise is. There is no best cardio. There is no best exercise. That may sound controversial, because you're like, what do you mean you don't care? You just got done telling us to be specific. Yeah, of course I did. But if I'm just trying to get somebody physically active to start, I just want them moving. So when someone asks me, is the treadmill better than the elliptical? Is the elliptical better than the rower, right? Should I do the Stairmaster? Should I do this? I don't care. Just get up and get moving. Whatever gets you into the gym, right? Julio, you don't have to answer, but I think it was you. Or maybe we were talking about is it better to do cardio first or strength training first?
Yeah, it was me.
Okay, yeah. You don't have to chime in. I know you're busy. To be physically active, like physiologically and statistically, we tend to see people who do their strength training first, tend to have a better physiologic effect, because if you do your cardio first, you're a little tired going into your strength training, then you can't push as hard. So you lose a little bit of strength, you're not recruiting all your motor units. It's harder to gain strength that way. So they generally say, okay, do your strength training first, do your carbs. Here's the thing though. If you like doing it the other way around, and so I want you going to the gym 5 days a week, and like, what often happens to all of us, myself included, is like, we're really motivated on Monday, we're really motivated on Tuesday. Oh my God, this week is getting long. Hump day, you're like, I made it through Wednesday. I'm starting to get tired. Thursday and Friday, those workouts are a maybe, right? We start to kind of slip off the wagon, right? So if you're like not looking forward to your workout on Friday and you're losing motivation and you're tired, you might skip your workout. So then you only went 4 out of the 5 days per week. So, but if you're more motivated, you're like, I like doing cardio first, strength training second, and that gets you to go all 5 days per week, that's better. So again, like, do I like the treadmill the most? Do I like the elliptical the most? The rowing machine, jumping rope, Stairmaster, spin bikes? It doesn't matter to me, it's irrelevant when the idea is just to increase your health and your well-being. Now, if you tell me you want to be a marathoner and you like make this, there's a really great story in one of my favorite books that we're going to talk about next mod, called The Power of Habit. There's a great story about a woman who, she was a smoker. She was really, really, really overweight, and she was in way over her head in credit card debt. And so she had a lot of like really bad habits. And she saw this, she went to Egypt despite being in massive amounts of debt. She took a vacation because one of her, like, she had just like a relationship had just ended and she was, sad. And so she goes to Egypt and she saw this like intense endurance race through the Egyptian desert. And she signed up for next year. She was like, in 1 year, I'm going to return to Egypt and I'm going to run this race. What an incredibly dangerous thing to do. But she still did it. And sure enough, 1 year later, she like showed up. She had lost a ton of weight. She got her life in order. She made some really key changes in her life. And the story is all about her habit changes and stuff. But that thing, she got physically active. She did a lot of running. She did a lot of swimming. She did a lot of biking. She signed up for 5Ks. She started doing triathlons. She started doing all these other things. And so by changing one of her key habits, she did this other, amazing thing. She didn't necessarily train the entire time just for running, but obviously more specific when it gets to like an athlete level. Yeah, you do want to be very specific about things. But for general health, guys, it doesn't matter. Just get out there and get active, right? Go for a hike. Go for a walk. Go play some disc golf. I don't like disc golf. I like ultimate frisbee. But like, do whatever gets you out there in the world. Go golfing. It'll be based on the individual. The type is irrelevant. Now, the other things that we often will consider beyond just type is intensity, right? So intensity in general, guys, will be determined by your frequency. Okay, so if your frequency is really, really high, then your intensity is going to have to be low. We can't have both. You can't have high intensity, working as hard as you can every day, and honestly have high frequency, do it every day. That's really dangerous. That is a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for falling off the wagon, losing motivation, because you're just exhausted. And it's also a recipe for an overuse injury. So intensity will be determined by your frequency. If the intensity is low, then your frequency is probably going to be like 5 to 7 days per week. But if your intensity is really high, then your frequency is going to be lower, closer to about 3 to 5 days per week. The recommended frequency and duration, and right here, guys, this sentence, also super key. I want everybody to get this sentence memorized. Pay attention to this. They love to ask you this question. I'm sure some of you guys have seen this question on your homework already in other classes. But the recommended frequency and duration of exercise in the US, according to ACSM's research, which then the US Health Department adopted, is 150 minutes per week of low intensity exercise. So that's 30 minutes Monday through Friday, low intensity. Just go for a 30-minute walk 5 days a week. It will have exceptionally positive health benefits for a sedentary person. And if you can't go for 30 minutes at a low intensity, gentle walk, try to go for 75 minutes, 5 days a week. That's 15 minutes Monday through Friday. You can do it on your lunch break where you walk a little bit more intensely and you get a little bit more out of breath. That's moderate intensity instead of low intensity. Go for a jog for 15 minutes in the middle of your day or before work, before you hop in the shower. Just get up, do a couple stretches, go for a 15-minute jog, and come back. That can have exceptionally positive benefits. Are you going to be a bodybuilder? Probably not. You know, is it going to help you lose weight? Honestly, probably not. It's probably not enough to actually like be enough exercise for a weight loss routine. But it will give your heart the work it needs. It'll help you manage your blood sugar just a little bit better. We see positive benefits starting at about 75 minutes of moderate intensity. It's not even high intensity, or 150 minutes of low intensity. Honestly, what I like to do, I tell my people, go for 12 minutes of high intensity. If you can handle it, go for 16 minutes of high intensity. You want to make my day, go for 20 minutes of high intensity. And what I mean by high intensity is try to get out of breath. So one of my favorite like routines that you guys can do, look this up. It's called a Tabata. The original Tabata was 20 seconds of work followed by 10 seconds of rest. So the original Tabata training was 20 seconds, push it to the limit work, rest for 10 seconds. And you do 8 rounds of that. Okay. So you do 8 rounds of that. That will take you exactly 4 minutes. So let's say you did like a 4-minute Tabata of, let's pick a couple body weight exercises. Let's say squats, sit-ups. Not my favorite exercise, by the way, but it'll work really well. Let's say jumping jacks, burpees. That one's real intense. And let's go with like a Superman. Okay. So, and actually let's probably move these two just for the sake of it. So there we go. We got a really, really, really simple program here, right? So what we're going to do, each of these is going to be perform 8 rounds of each exercise before moving on to the next. And each round will consist of 20 seconds of work, 10 seconds of rest. Repeat. So I do 20 seconds of body weight squats, right? So I'm there, right? Let's get a little timer going here. If you guys are at home, you want to do this, go ahead and do this. Tabata Timer. Literally, I'm just going to click the first one, and I'm going to hit start here. It's going to count me down for the first 10 seconds, so I have time to prep here. And just like this, and here we go. Oh, Lord, I did not know this was happening. So here I am, just doing some gentle body weight squats. It's nothing crazy. I'm halfway through my first set. I'm not going to do this for the full 4 minutes. We've got class to get through, but here we go. And there we go. I get to rest. I get to rest for 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And there we go. I'm back into my squats. So I would do 8 rounds of that. That will take exactly 4 minutes. Technically, it'll take 3 minutes and 50 seconds because you don't have to count the last 10 seconds of rest at the very end. So I finish my squats. I move on to jumping jacks. I finish my jumping jacks. I do 8 rounds of that. I do 8 rounds of sit-ups, 8 rounds of burpees, 8 rounds of, that will be exactly 20 minutes. Perfectly. everybody can do that. You do that 5 days a week, right? That's 100 minutes high intensity exercise. Imagine the benefits that that would have. That's all it takes. It doesn't have to be a lot to experience health benefits. It doesn't have to be 5 days a week, an hour in the gym every day, which I love. You know, I'm usually doing about an hour to 90 minutes in the gym 4 days a week, and I play about 2 hours of Ultimate twice per week. I love that. That's like my lifestyle. No, you don't have, nobody has to do that much, right? That is the difference between our intensity and our frequency. Heck, if you did 20 minutes, 4 days a week, right? Let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and then next week, like Tuesday, right? 4 days a week, that's 80 minutes. It's great. And that's the high intensity stuff. So there's our frequency and intensity. That's all we need to get that. And again, guys, remember these numbers. It's 150 minutes per week, low intensity. So that could be 30 minutes in 5 days, or less. Or it's 75 minutes of moderate to high intensity exercise per week. Moderate intensity is what they'll say, not high, but moderate of 75 minutes. And then we got duration, right? Typically, in terms of duration, to see, endurance. If you do want somebody to actually improve their endurance, they're going to need to go for like a little bit of a longer duration. Generally, that's like a 45 to 60 minute session, which is where like the, sort of personal training sessions came from. That's what you'll often sell in most gyms, unless you work at LA Fitness, which has like 30-minute sessions. But that's a really good place to keep somebody in an aerobic state long enough to build endurance. So if somebody wants to have more energy, they're like, I want to start exercising so I can increase my energy output and just feel, better and have more energy in life, play with my kids all day. Okay, if that's the case, you need to do about 45 minutes of sustained aerobic activity. That will increase like the aerobic metabolism much better, which will have very positive benefits in regards to aerobic sessions and stuff. So now, NASM is going to break this down a little bit different than ACSM did. ACSM paid attention to 3 things: the type, the frequency, and the duration, right? NASM will want you to memorize what are called your FIT principles. I know a lot of you guys have seen these FIT principles a million times. They just come back a lot. They're very, very, very popular concepts. They're in several chapters of your textbook. So get familiar with all 5 of these. FIT principles stand for the frequency, intensity, time, type, and enjoyment. For the record, NASM did not create these. ACSM did not create these. These are just sort of general guidelines that every personal training certification sort of deals with. And so when considering the variables that NASM is going to break all this information down, they're going to peel it apart a little bit more. And we're going to look at the FIT principles. That's your frequency, which is the number of sessions in a given time period. Your intensity, which is the level of demand. The time, which is the length of time in the activity. The type, which is the mode, treadmill, elliptical, whatever. And the enjoyment factor is the one NASM slaps on. This one's NASM specific. The rest of the original FIT principles were FITT. But NASM threw the enjoyment in there, the level of pleasure derived, which I think is super important, because if your client hates the workout, I promise you, they will not do it. I'm going to see my friend Erin tonight because she's a friend of Lindsay's. And Erin asked me to build her a workout. And so I spent like 2 hours building her like a really nice workout, gave it to her. She was like, this is amazing. She's never once done it. Because she hates working out. She's like, just make me a program. I hate working out. And I was like, I don't normally make programs for people who hate working out, but I like you, so okay. So that will, I'm sure it'll come up tonight at some point, because she says it every time I see her. So frequency, intensity, time, type, enjoyment. Get these memorized, guys. and get their definition. Because what'll happen, you'll get a homework question that's like, blank is the number of sessions in a given time period, you know, and then it'll give you 4 options and you got to answer it, right? So that's the frequency, number of sessions in a given time period. Intensity, level of demand. That is what we're going to talk about next. When we look at the rest of this PowerPoint is going to be spent looking at how to prescribe intensity. Time is the length. And time, by the way, that can be the length of time in the activity that day, or it could be the length of like a block, like a cycle. That could also be like the duration of how long you're doing, you know, this type of training, and then you switch it up next month. Type is the mode, and enjoyment is the level of pleasure. All right, so yeah, let's take a look at any questions on any of that, by the way. Do we feel good about that? Let's look at intensity. So here's where the math comes back. I'm sorry. I'm not a math teacher. It's not my thing in the world, but here we are. So there are a couple different ways you can prescribe intensity. There is the classic heart rate max percentage. Okay, that's actually this middle one here. These don't go in the order I want them to. Working in a target of your heart rate max works like this. So your target heart rate, is whatever I want you to hit. Let's see, let's get an example here. Simon, how old are you?
I am 22.
22? Okay, so the target heart rate formula is this, guys. It is, and this is the classic straight percentage formula. Sorry, so the straight percentage formula, right, is going to look like this. Target heart rate equals, and it's always this number, 220, always, minus your age. Okay, that's the straight percentage formula. So if I'm using Simon, right, I would say 220 minus 22 is going to be 198. And that's his heart rate max. So his heart rate max is 198. That is the straight percentage formula. Okay, 220 minus his age equals heart rate max. Okay. Oh, I said target heart rate. Whoops, I actually screwed this up. Sorry. That should say heart rate max. Heart rate max equals 220 minus your age. Okay, so that's his heart rate max. So 220 minus 22 is his 198 heart rate max. So then if I wanted to get him to work at, let's say, 65% heart rate max equals, for him, right, that's going to be 198 times 0.65, so times 65%. That means it's 128.7. We'll round that up to 129. Let's say I wanted to be at 75% heart rate max. Right? That means that's going to be 198 times 0.75. That's 75%. That's 148.5. I'll round that one up to 149. So if I wanted Simon to do moderate to low intensity cardio, moderate, I would say, all right, Simon, I want you to hop on whatever cardio equipment you want. I want you to keep an eye on the heart rate monitor. And I want you to be somewhere between 129 and 149 for 30 minutes. So if it drops below 129, I want you to pick up the pace, or pick up the incline, or pick up the resistance, whatever piece of equipment you're using. If it goes above 149, I love that. congratulations, you're working hard, but I actually want you to be at like low intensity right now because we're trying to build your endurance. You go any higher than 149, you're gonna start to build up lactic acid and you're gonna feel like the burning builds up. We don't want that in this routine right now. We'll worry about that in later routines. For now, I want you somewhere between 129 and 149. Make sense? That's the heart rate max formula. That's the straight percentage. Now, the straight percentage formula is good, but it does have a couple problems. What do you guys think the biggest problem with this formula would be? Why do you think we might not use this formula? Actually, I should have put that down. Anybody have any guesses?
Maybe inaccurate because of the age.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. Yeah, it could be inaccurate. What does that have to do with age, though?
You probably still have to calculate other parts of the body other than the age, right?
There we go. Nailed it. Yeah, you killed it. Absolutely. It assumes that every 22-year-old on the planet is the same level of fitness. Is that accurate, do you think? Probably not. Right? I would like to think, I would hope that I'm in a little bit better cardiovascular shape than some other 33-year-olds my age, you know? So, Arlene, do you have a question or comment? Oh. So, we have different formulas, okay? We have ones other than the straight percentage formula. What we have is called the target, where we have the heart rate reserve method. That's the HRR method, right? Target heart rate using percentage of heart rate reserve. So this is, wait, what's that? What's that, Arlene?
Oh, sorry, that was my cat.
Oh gosh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Here, I thought I was mute again. Sorry.
Oh, I think, yeah, you might have them backwards. You were muting when you were talking to me and then unmute. I've definitely done that on some Zoom meetings. That's the benefit of being the teacher. I never have to take mine off mute. This is the Karvanen formula. And I don't know which version they'll test you on, guys. I don't know if they're going to call it the Karvanen formula. I don't know if they are going to call it the heart rate reserve method. I'm not sure which one. Just memorize them as both. The heart rate reserve is the Karvanen formula. The Karvanen formula is the heart rate reserve, okay? I hate it when they have two names for things, but it happens sometimes. So what this is the difference between your heart rate max, which is still that 220 minus your age. So we're still using that. But it's the difference between that and your resting heart rate. Now, go back to what we've been talking about all week, right? We've been talking about how the more you do cardio, the stronger your heart is. The stronger your heart is, the less your heart has to beat to get a certain amount of work done. So that is where, when we're looking at it, a person who is fitter is going to have a lower resting heart rate. Their lower resting heart rate indicates that they have a higher stroke volume, they have a higher cardiac output, they have a stronger heart. So if I took into account what your resting heart rate is here versus what your resting heart rate is there, now I'm going to get very different numbers that are catered much more specifically to you rather than just any 22-year-old. So this formula is used to determine exercise intensity by considering the difference between the two numbers, the heart rate max and the heart rate rest, and working at a percentage thereof. Okay, so the formula here is a little bit more complicated. Okay, our formula now is going to be, and we're going to say this is the heart rate reserve method, also known as the Karvanen formula. There, right? So this formula is admittedly a little bit more complicated. Okay. It is going to need to have the heart rate max minus the heart rate rest times intensity desired intensity. I'll put that. I'll put desired intensity. And then because we took it off, we need to add back in the heart rate rest at the end, right? Because we subtracted the heart rate rest. Now, if you were to just punch this into a calculator as is, so if I pull up a calculator here, so let's say I am, I'm 33, right? And let's say my resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute, right? So if I go 220 minus my age of 33, gives me 187. So my heart rate max is 187. Simon's younger than I am. His heart rate max was 198. So now if I subtract my resting heart rate, so 187 minus 60. Oh, actually I did this slightly wrong. I was showing you the wrong way to do this. 220 minus 33 minus 60 times my desired intensity of, let's say 0.65, so 65%, plus my heart rate rest, which is that 60 again. It actually works pretty well. Gives me 143, which is the number that I want. Here's the problem with what I did in this formula though. My calculator here in my phone, or I'm sorry, on my computer, automatically hits enter and finishes doing the last formula every single time. Now, if I didn't do it that way, if I just go to my phone, right, and I punch it in straight the way I just did, right, I open up my calculator, 220 minus, and then I'm 33 minus my heart rate of 60 beats per minute times 0.65 plus 60, and I just hit enter, it's going to give me 208. That is way wrong. And the reason why is because I didn't put my friggin' brackets in there. I didn't finish doing some of the math before I did my other math. So you have to make sure that when you're writing this formula out, if you decide to do this formula, I'm going to teach you how to do it just with a calculator, you need to put the right brackets. So we need a bracket around this. We need a bracket here. So the first number you need to calculate is the heart rate max minus the heart rate rest. Then once you're finished doing that, multiply it by the intensity. Once you're finished doing that, add the heart rate rest back on at the end. So here's our example client. Actually, no, we're using Simon as an example, right? So what I would do, step one, is I would go 220 minus 22 is going to give me his heart rate max of 198. Okay, now I'm going to say, Simon, do you know your resting heart rate?
I do not.
Okay, let's say it's 60, right? That's about 10 beats above average, in a good way. Below, I guess, below average to make you above average. I just broke my brain. Normal heart rate is 75 to 85 beats, or 70 to 80 beats per minute. Let's say yours is 60, right? So his resting heart rate equals 60 beats per minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 198 minus 60 is going to give me 138, right? And then I'm going to take 138 and I'm going to multiply it times 0.65. That's 65%. And that's going to give me 89.7, which will round to 90. And then let's do it again. Well, actually, no, I'll leave it alone. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add his resting heart rate back on. So I'm going to take 90 plus his resting heart rate of 60. And that's going to give me a new target heart rate of 150. I'm going to repeat that process again for 75%. That's going to give me a new number which is 103.5. I'm going to round that up to 104. So 104 plus 60 is going to give me 164. So target heart rate range, instead of being 129 to 149, now it's going to be 138 to 164. I'll put that up here as well, actually. So that is how we do the carbonate formula. It's pretty, I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than the other formula, but this is much more specific to him. Look at how much harder it is. Instead of 129, it starts at 138. Instead of going to 149, it goes to 164. And that's because this formula is assuming that Simon's in pretty good shape. And I'll bet it's right, you know? So let's go back one more time and look at the example, okay? We got a 30-year-old client. They have a resting heart rate of 75 beats per minute. Their heart rate max is 220 minus 30. That's going to give them 190. So 220 minus 30 equals 190. That's their heart rate max. The desired intensity is 65 to 75% of that heart rate max. So the heart rate reserve comes out to 150 through 161. That's the 65% to 75%. So 190 minus 75 times 65% plus the 75. We're going to put back in at the end. 190 times 75% plus the 75. We're going to put it back in at the end. That's our new range. So you guys can do this by just going and Googling carbonate calculator. You can also find this. NASM has this built into the NASM Edge app, or you could just download a carbonate app on your phone. And it's so simple for your clients. And by the way, you got to do this for 65, 75, 85, 95. You got to do a lot of numbers here. We're going to make it so much easier. So we're going to enter our client's age. We're going to enter their resting heart rate. We're going to hit calculate. And there's our 65%. There's our 75%. There's our 75% to 85. There's our 85 to 90. So those are going to be depending on what you're trying to target. If you're trying to target your immediate energy system, you need to be between like 86 and 95% of your heart rate max. That's the ATP-PC system. You're trying to target glycolysis, you need to be at like 76 to 85%. And you want to be aerobic, well, then you want to be like 65 to 75%, which is what we practice with just here. So that's going to be moderate intensity. So if you could do, if Simon was my client and he's like, look, I just want to get a little bit more physically active and build up my endurance, you know, before I go to the doctors and like get written permission to exercise, great. I want you to be somewhere between 150 and 164 beats per minute. And I want you to do it 15 minutes a day, Monday through Friday. You do that, you're golden. Get your endurance built up, then we'll make it harder later on. You know, that is how we sort of work on a general routine. So that's the target heart rate reserve method. That's how we prescribe intensity. Now, who has questions? Did all that math and all those numbers that I hopefully didn't move through too quickly, did that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Everybody feels confident. This is the thing I'm worst at. I'm really bad with math.
My only question is how much of this math is in the NASM exam? Because this just gave me like a flashback of like junior high school algebra.
So technically none of it. Technically.
Okay.
So here's I think 3 or 4 ways they may ask you about this stuff. Yeah, let's go over a little test.
Yeah.
So you won't have to do any math on your test. I did see one homework question that NASM like gave us, and I was like, they wouldn't do that on the real test, I don't think. That was like, which of the following is the max heart rate for a person 40 years old? And so you had to remember 220 minus 40 is 180. that was like really basic math. I don't think they'll actually do that on the real test. What they'll do is they'll ask you a variety of questions like this. Which of the following formulas would be used to calculate heart rate max? Now, heart rate max, you got to pay attention to the language in the question. Heart rate max is just the 220 minus your age number. So you're going to look for the 220 minus your age formula, right? Honestly, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull up today's homework. Let me take a look. Honestly, I'll bet there's a question. I'm sure they put questions like this to get you guys ready. That's the wrong one. Oh, it'd be the second half. Oh, they didn't put it in here. Okay, all right. I assume they would have. So that's how they'll ask it. They'll say like, which of the following formulas would be used to calculate heart rate max? Or they'll flip that question around. They'll say 220 minus your age is the formula for blank. And then it'll be like heart rate reserve method, target heart rate max. It's the right answer. All the above. That's how it'll work. Same exact thing. They'll ask the same style of question. Which of the following formulas would be used to calculate the Karvanen target heart rate or the heart rate reserve? And that is the more complicated formula. So I don't need you to necessarily know how to do the math in your test, but we practice this stuff and I show you the math because hopefully it burns the formula into your head because you do want to be able to recognize that. Same thing with BMI. They won't ask you to calculate someone's BMI, but you do need to know that the formula is weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. Because if they ask you a question like, what is this formula? And then you got a multiple choice 4 options, you need to know how to pick it out of a lineup. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. But yes, they won't make you do math. That'd be
Okay.
crazy, you know? Because look
So
at
just
these
be
numbers.
familiar with the formulas. Okay.
Yeah. And which, by the way, sucks. I used to hate memorizing formulas. I apologize that I'm making you guys do it as an adult. Like my high school version of me would be so upset right now. He hated learning formulas. This is why I hate math so much. It's a small part of your test, but it's you know, doesn't matter how small the part of your test is. You know, we want to make sure you're getting as many questions right as possible. Now, obviously, you can also calculate things out as a percentage of Vo2 max. If you had a client who went and got a Vo2 max test and they got a printout and it said, you know, their Vo2 max is this when their heart rate is here, it's this when their heart rate is here. You can also work at a percentage of that. Obviously, that requires some sophisticated testing and constant monitoring of oxygen consumption. Difficult in a regular gym setting, probably not very relevant to most regular trainers. If you work in a lab, it's great. You know, it's the most accurate out of all the methods, but not very practical in a gym setting. They're getting there though, man. They invented this a couple years ago. They invented this thing. They call it the Vo2 Master. It is not attached to a tube. It has all the components in the mask right here to measure your Vo2 max. And then it just sends it to the Bluetooth in your phone. It's $5,000 to buy one of these, which is obviously very expensive. But if you had a truck, like say you have a pickup and you had a spin bike and you can take that spin bike to people's houses, you could do like $50 in-home Vo2 max testing. I'm sure there's a market for it. I'm sure that could be a business. Because people want to know, you know, there are people who want to know that stuff and they have to go to like labs and stuff to get it done. Now you can do it from the comfort of your home. If you had a treadmill, you could just like, you know, lift off your truck. You have like a little truck with a treadmill in it that like, you just like, come on out and you just pull onto the driveway and have them like do it. I'm sure people would pay for that. You'd make that $5,000 back because it's like $100 to do a Vo2 test. So you did 50 of them, you just paid for the thing, you know? Anyway. So other exercise intensity methods, Vo2 Max, not super practical. One of the best ones we've got is using target intensity, using what is called the Rpe scale. That's the rating of perceived exertion scale. This is also often referred to as the Borg scale. This is another one of like, it drives me a little crazy. I hate it when they double label stuff, but they will sometimes call it the Rpe scale. They'll call it the rating of perceived exertion scale, or they'll call it the Borg scale. They are the same thing. I hate it, but make sure you're prepared to know all three names. And this is, it's in the name. It's the rating of perceived exertion, right? So it involves rating a specific exercise based on how difficult they think the exercise is. So I'd be like, all right, Alyssa, I want you to run up this 6 flight of stairs and then run back down. And I want you to work at about like a 14 out of 6 to 20 on the scale. And that's how the scale works, by the way. It's a scale of 6 to 20, with 6 being no exertion at all, that's you asleep, and 20 being you are about to throw up because you're working so hard. So I want you to be about a 14 on that scale. That means I want you to go up pretty light and gentle, up the scale. If I scaled it 1 to 10, I'd say it's like a 6, maybe a 6.5. So that's up the flight of stairs and back down. Versus, all right, Alyssa, I want you to throw up at the end of the staircase. Like I want you a 10 out of 10, a 20 out of 6 to 20 on the Borg scale. Let's go. Like that's how we do the rating of perceived exertion. So I want you to ask yourself consistently in your head, how hard you think it is. So it's a scale of 6 to 20, with 6 being complete rest, 20 being maximal effort. Generally, we will modify that Borg scale to make it easier for our clients to understand. We'll do 1 to 10. 6 is about, where exercise starts. It's just outside of your warm-up. 7 is like light exercise. 8 is like moderate, maybe getting intense exercise. 9 is like working really pretty freaking hard. And 10 is maximum effort. So that's the rating of perceived exertion, right? Part of this can also sometimes be incorporated with what is actually a separate method, which is called the talk test. You can also use this with your clients, and we're going to break it into 3 categories. This measures exercise intensity by basically how difficult it is to talk. So you're going to pay attention to how your client is talking. If they're like, yeah.
Hey, Brad, you keep cutting out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
1 second. Let me let my internet calm down then. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yeah.
I could.
Okay.
No problem.
Yeah, it happens when my internet starts crapping out. So the next method is the talk test. We break it into 3 categories: low, medium, and high. So if you make somebody run and they're like, it's like, how do you feel? And they're like, that was hard, like they just can't get the sentence out. That's high intensity, right? Speaking is nearly impossible. It's very difficult. But if they're like, yeah, this is very tough, and I feel like I can keep it up, and you can hear a little bit of breath in their voice, but they're able to like talk consistently, that's low intensity. They can hold a conversation, right? And then medium intensity is where they need small breaks while they're talking. They're like, this is pretty challenging, but I got it, right? But they're still able to keep going. That's medium intensity. So that's the talk test method. That's also kind of based on their perceived exertion. So you'd tell your client, it's like, this is how I used to break it down when I was doing exercise classes. I would be like, all right, if you can talk, you're not working hard enough. I want everybody in here to be out of breath. And I want you breathing hard. I want you out of breath. Those are different, and they'd be like, oh, and then and they'd be sprinting, right? And that was to indicate a sprint. I was like, now everybody recover. By the end of the next 2 minutes, everybody gets 2 minutes of recovery. I want you to be able to fully get through the ABCs and talk easily. And so I would teach group exercise classes using the talk test method. and just break it down that way. That's very easy for your clients to understand. They really like that. It's much easier for them to sort of wrap their heads around for intensity. So if they've got a heart rate monitor, Joseph, I know you bought one yesterday, right? If you got a heart rate monitor, use the Carvenin formula. By the way, yours, it'll have that, it'll do your heart rate. It'll do Carvenin instantly when you put it in the app. It won't even use regular straight percentage formula because it'll know what your resting heart rate is because you're wearing the strap. So it'll do the good formula right off the bat. As long as you enter your information, you do got to make sure you punch it into the app beforehand. But if you guys don't have the heart rate monitor, that's okay. You can use the RPE method and say, all right, I want this to be like a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, or working hard, right? Or you can use the talk test method, and that can prescribe intensity. Now, there's also one final method, which is also not very common in most regular gyms, and that's the metabolic equivalence formula, or the MET formula, MET. And the MET is a measurement of your Vo2 max being converted into its lowest form. So basically, when you are consuming oxygen at complete rest, guys, the amount of oxygen that you consume is about 3.5 milliliters. If you were to like fill the oxygen into a beaker, about 3.5 milliliters of oxygen for every 1 kilogram of your body weight per minute. That's a MET. That's one MET, right? Chances are you guys are right around 1 MET right now because you're not working out. You're just sitting around. You're very sedentary. You're not consuming very much oxygen. So if you were you're going to burn the lowest, close to the lowest amount of calories that your body burns. Now, if you were to start doing more physical activity, you would be consuming double the amount of oxygen. You'd be at 2 METs. So that's going to be 7 milliliters of oxygen for 1 kilogram of body weight every minute. That means that you are consuming twice as much oxygen. That means you're burning twice as many calories. If you're at 3 METs, that's 3 times 4 METs, right? So here's sort of an example. Actually, oh yeah, no, it's perfect. Of some examples here. So when you're at home and you're doing some chores, maybe sweeping, gardening, playing with the dog, waxing your car, right? You're anywhere from like 3 to 6 METs. Okay. That's 3 to 6 times. And it's not just like times calories. You know, it's not like 6 times as many as you're burning because you have your base calories, right? So we're talking about like everything from your basal category calories, everything beyond that times 2 times 3 times 4, right? That's 6 METs, 7 METs, whatever. Here's exercise, right? So if you're, playing volleyball, it's actually really similar to sweeping to like vacuuming, I guess. Casual volleyball, that is. I've seen people play volleyball and it's exhausting. Backpacking, basketball, soccer, good Lord. Competitive soccer is like 10 METs, 10 times as many calories you'd be burning as if you were on the couch. So I like METs. I like to describe METs, but I don't calculate METs with my clients. It's a really accurate method, but it's complicated for your clients to wrap their heads around. Instead, I just like to kind of describe like, they get on the treadmill for 10 minutes and it says, hey, you burned 13 METs. I'm like, guess what? In the last hour that you were on that treadmill, you burned 13 times as many calories as you would have if you were sitting on the couch. And that is something they can wrap their heads around. So I do think it's motivating, but calculating it's a pain in the rear. You need to know Vo2 Max, you know all kinds of other stuff. All right, any questions on any of the math before I wrap up with a rapid fire example of all these diseases?
No, I think I'm good.
All righty. All right, so let's go ahead and very quickly just kind of go through some of these diseases and how exercise is going to affect them. We're going to cover this much better in our special populations class, but it's up here for now, so let's kind of go through it. So heart disease, #1 killer of adults in the United States, and that is usually happening due to atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is where plaque, that's what we call it, which is discarded cholesterol, starts building up on the inside walls of your blood vessels. So blood vessels are supposed to be empty, these empty tubes, but instead we start filling those empty tubes with this fatty material called plaque. Now, if that happens in your legs, you'll end up having a little bit of pain in your legs. We call that PAD, peripheral arterial disease. If it happens in your arms, you'll get a pain that runs in your arm. You're not getting any oxygen and your muscles are like, hey, this sucks. If it happens in your heart, you will experience what we call a heart attack. And that's what's known as coronary heart disease or coronary artery disease. And it's where your coronary arteries, which are the arteries that surround your heart and give your heart blood, right? Actually, here we go. Here's actually what has happened. This is actual heart damage, right? These arteries, which would normally be sending blood to the heart so it can like contract and, you know, be a muscle, gets blocked. So then it clots. And then now this area here, this is getting plenty of oxygen. This area here is not getting any oxygen. The heart muscle can die. And when that happens, it's not coming back. That is a heart attack. Very, very dangerous. But it can be reduced through exercise. So go exercise, you know, get out there, get physically active. Because you're going to push that blood. It's going to knock that cholesterol off the wall, right? It's a very effective way to lose weight, to increase your aerobic endurance. So like increasing your aerobic enzymes, decrease blood pressure, strengthen the heart, to push that stuff through the blood vessels, knock that crap off the walls. You know, very, 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 very good for us. And it burns up your cholesterol for energy. So, well, for hormones, we love that, right? So it decreases your risk of what we call a myocardial infarction. It's the fancy way of saying heart attack. You hear it in medical drama, it's like TV shows all the time. It's like, it's got a myocardial infarction. They mean heart attack, but it sounds better on TV. That's one of the benefits of exercise, reducing your risk of heart disease. Also, skeletal muscle fiber can help with some of these things. The more muscle you have, muscle is a metabolically hungry tissue. Eats a lot of energy, right? It takes a lot of energy to keep your heart or to keep your muscles working. So that's great. It burns calories. It has some really positive benefits here, right? Increased muscular strength for one. We've been talking all about that for the last couple of days. Increased endurance for another. Increased power. All three of those things are going to be helpful for training when it comes to fitness, right? And all of that's going to have positive benefits on your bones, your muscles, your joints, your nervous system, all of it. So in general, when we're prescribing an exercise program, we want it to be like moderate intensity exercise where they're lifting relatively heavy, but not too heavy. They don't necessarily have to do like max strength training. So honestly, the best way to prescribe like a brand new routine for most people who are just trying to get physically active, they're not necessarily trying to become the most fit person in the world. Pick a resistance that can be repeated no more than about 10 times. That's it. They can do 10 of them, great. They can do 15 of them, a little too easy. Let's make it harder, right? They can't do 10, it's a little too hard, make it lighter, right? Start there. That's a brand new person. Everybody who asks me for like a routine who doesn't want to train with me, who I don't get to do an assessment with, I will often just tell them, yeah, try to do right around like 3 to 4 sets of about 10 repetitions. If you can do 15, it's too easy. If you can only do 5, it's too light, or it's too heavy, right? Stay right around 10 and do like 4 sets of that, and pick your most basic exercises. Pick a squat exercise, pick a hinge exercise, pick a push exercise for your chest, pick a press exercise for your shoulders, and pick a pull exercise for your back. Do that a couple times per week. That's my simplest advice. Keep it really watered down. They train with me, they'll get the specific stuff. You know, they buy a session, great, I'll break it down. Let's get more specific, you know, let's figure out what's best for you, you know. But in general, pick those 5 key movements, you know, do a little bit of balance work, get a little core work in there, you know, they're gonna be in good shape. So we know that like regular exercise, particularly individual exercise, is the best way to really make sure that we're sort of working on these things. It's going to help arthritis. You get clients with arthritis. And when I say arthritis, I mean osteoarthritis, like degenerative joint disease, not so much rheumatoid. Unfortunately, exercise can help with rheumatoid arthritis in a roundabout way. Like it can just help like strengthen everything in general, which can, in response, reduce your risk of dealing with inflammation because maybe you take a bad step. But unfortunately, rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease. We don't have a direct impact on that, sadly. But osteoarthritis, degenerative joint disease, where your joints are just not healthy, exercise has really big positive benefits on that, particularly aquatic exercise. Go get in the pool, go do a little bit of swimming, lift some pool dumbbells, those little styrofoam ones. Really positive stuff, guys. Asthma, we know asthma can be improved through exercise. Obviously, it can increase your oxidative enzymes. It can increase your diaphragm and, to produce more hemoglobin. You're going to be better at using oxygen. Love that. It reduces your risk of cancers, right? Love that, right? It produces more energy in the mitochondria, oxidative wise, protects your body from what we call oxidative stress, which is causing like cancer cells and stuff. It can improve COPD. We know that like getting a little bit of like intermittent walking, running, cycling, swimming, whatever, can have really positive benefits on increasing that oxygen delivery, and it can even clean out your lungs a little bit. You do go for a jog, you're like, blah, blah, blah. It can break up all that mucus and kind of get it out of your lungs, which can be very positive. Like I said, coronary heart disease, dyslipidemia, that's high cholesterol, hypertension, high blood pressure, right? All of those things can be improved through exercise as well. Diabetes, we know that like, particularly the exercise like burning through glycolysis, you keep it around 10 reps, right? Staying glycolysis, that's the 20 to 30 second range per set. If you do that, you're going to burn through your glycogen stores. So when you bring in carbohydrates, your body will have a reason to put those carbohydrates in your glycogen rather than just leaving all that sugar in your blood to start to cause problems. Love that. And then obviously it just burns a lot of calories, which can reduce your risk of obesity. Obesity often leads to a lot of those other diseases I just mentioned: cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and stuff like that. And then peripheral vascular disease, that's the clotting, that's the blood clotting in the legs that I mentioned. It can reduce your risk of sarcopenia, reduce that risk of losing your muscle mass, and it can reduce your risk of dealing with like a nervous system spinal cord injury, such as like a herniated disc or something like that, by strengthening your core and keeping you safe. So I know it comes as no surprise, but we love exercise. that's the take-home message from the last like 20 slides. It's like, yeah, we love exercise. Is it good for this? Yes, it is. Is it good for that? Yes, it is. Good for everything. Exercise is medicine. You want to take a cholesterol medication for the rest of your life, or do you want to go out for a jog? Hopefully the latter. All right. So questions, comments, concerns. How's everybody feeling today?
Good.
Cool. I'd said it was an easier lesson today because it was less biology, but yeah.
Good for you.
I apologize for the math. It's the worst.
I know, bright and early hit us with the math.
Right. All right. So that is all I got for you today, guys. For those of you who are primarily evening students, I really appreciate you guys coming in early today. I'll have the video up here on Canvas as fast as I can. Your homework 4 goes out today. So this is our final piece of homework. So now you've got homework 3 and homework 4. The content from those 2 quizzes, the homeworks, are going to be in the final. So over the weekend, guys, please try to practice those. Take them over and over and over and over again. Get familiar with them. The more familiar you are with them on Wednesday when we take the final, you'll be super prepared. You're going to feel great, confident, and you're going to kill it. So other than that, I'll let everybody out of here. And I hope everybody has a great 3-day weekend. Do something cool.
All right, cool. Have a nice party.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All Yeah.
Thank you. Tell your
Bye.
girlfriend happy
Have fun.
birthday.
All right.
I will.
Bye,
Yeah,
Brad.
she'll love
Bye,
that.
everyone.
She like
Take
Bye,
knows
care.
his name because she's on the other side of the
Alright.
wall. Like so she hears me like saying people's names all day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Guys.